Hi, Michelle Houghton here with Copic in the Craft Room. Welcome back, and this is a video that's serving twofold today. I am going to take a closer look at one of Marianne Walker's latest books about working with Copic markers. If you haven't seen this series yet, it is a series of books that she is creating for Copic users, or in particular beginning Copic users, not only for the users themselves, but people who are carrying these wonderful markers in their stores, and so that they have a resource that can get people started in learning, especially if they don't have classes in the area or someone who can come and teach in their store. This particular book that we're gonna kind of take a closer look at is actually the intro to coloring. This is really your starting point. There are a couple other books out there already. There's one on coloring flowers, and there's also one on coloring animals. Now, both of those books are going to have some great introductory information about Copic markers, kind of the why and the how and how great they are. This one in particular is really going to start you at the very base level of Copic knowledge and work you up through some information. So what I am doing today is I'm going to take a look at one of the lessons, and not the beginning lessons, because those are things I think you can do on your own. And we have done several videos about the numbering system and storing your markers and basic blending. So I want to use one of the techniques that's also in this book. And there's several that are really cool, kind of above and beyond your basic information. As you get into the second half of the book, there's a wonderful one about coloring wood grain, other things with a Colorless Blender, and the one that I'm going to look at today is coloring glass. And one of the things a lot of people ask about is coloring transparent objects, coloring reflective objects, and this is just a really basic way, and they give a couple different variations about how to color glass, which right now I've seen, we're in the spring of 2016, because I know people come and go with these videos. The glass jars and vases with flowers in them is an incredibly popular image right now, both in digital art and in stamp art. And so you're going to see a lot of these out there. So anyways, I think this is a great lesson. There's all sorts of other lessons. And the best part of these books to me is the images that Marianne colors and samples in the book. Almost all of those images are in the back for your personal use. So you can copy these onto your favorite Copic paper. So see, I could literally do this exact exercise on that jar and flower. There's a hummingbird and a butterfly, and all of those have step outs of how to do them, or at least the instructions of how Marianne did them. So even if you don't see that step by step, she gives you the instructions. You can come back, make your print, and then give it a good practice. Run yourself and multiple times, because you have these. Don't color in the book. This is slick, shiny paper. It's not going to do what you want it to. Copy this, or take it to a copy shop and have them copy it onto your favorite Copic paper. I'm going to use Express It blending card today because that is my favorite Copic paper, but there's a lot of others out there, and especially if you're practicing, you might use something that's a little less expensive, and that's okay. So I'm going to use this, and she's given us two different ways to do it. One way is to start with a little bit darker color and then use your Colorless Blender to push some of that color out and fade your color. The second route is to just color it very carefully. The concept being that when you're looking through a clear glass object, one that's holding something like water or a stem, what we see inside the jar becomes lighter, and especially at the center of that jar, it's going to appear lighter at the center. We're going to have some coloration around the edge. The stem from the top versus what's inside the water is going to look lighter inside the water. So those are what I'm going to attempt to do with my image today. The image I'm going to use, and let me get a little closer so you can see. This is the image I'm going to use today. I'm going to put all the information below the video, and I'll also tag it right along here. It's going to pop up who this is by, so you can see and look for it yourself if you're looking for this particular stamp. It's a set that comes with a jar, separate the stems and the flowers so that you can layer those. Later, I'm going to talk about how I lined those up and did that image. So if you're interested in how to do that and stack those stamped images, you can. I've already colored a piece of the image, and I know everyone wants to know, well, what colors did you use? I want it to look like yours, or maybe you don't, but if you're interested, the flowers are the series of yellows. I've got a Y000, I've got a Y11, Y15, Y17. The center of the flowers is an E74 and E77, but I just went with some dark browns. The leaves, and this is going to be the one I want to remember. All the rest of those I'm done with. Those yellows and browns are not going to come back, or earth tones. The greens, however, are going to come back. I've got a G43 and a G46, and I've got those on the leaves. Now, normally if this was sitting outside of a jar, those two colors would be exactly the same colors. I've got a leaf right here and I've got the stems coming down. I would use these exact same two colors on those. Now I have two options. I can color those in with these two colors and then lighten them with Colorless Blender. Here's my concern with that. If I fill in those stems exactly how I want them and then come on top of it with Colorless Blender, because of how skinny those stems are, it's gonna blow that green out. It's gonna go outside my black lines. So it works, but it's a really challenging when you have it, in particular, little small items. It's gonna blow that green probably out into the water, and then I've lost the effect. So I am gonna start with my stems and my leaf starting lighter. So I've used the two colors up here, but most of this down here is only gonna get the one color. I might have a tiny bit, but see, even where I see some of that leaf and stem where it would get darker, it's tucked underneath all of those, all the ridges on the jar. And so I'm just not gonna see it that clearly. So I'm gonna keep that very light. And then the jar itself, I'm gonna assume is full of water. So I'm gonna use a couple colors. And again, my Colorless Blender on that area. So I'm gonna come in with my C3 and B41 and Colorless Blender and create the look of that. I've also got this little hello there. To me, those areas, because they're raised and kind of concentrated, I am gonna get a little bit more color here as well. So I'm playing with it. I will probably speed this up a little bit because always I seem to take too long to color. Not so much I take too long, I'm taking my time so you can see what it should look like. But then my videos end up a little too long. So I will speed it up a little bit. Remember, there's always that control on YouTube that you can slow them down. And so I'm sure I sound ridiculous, but because then my voice is all out of whack. But you can do that to slow the speed of my coloring down if you need to do that. All right. So I'm gonna get coloring. I'm really just working on that jar today. I'm gonna start with the jar and then I'm gonna color those stems and leaves at the end, but keep them lighter so it appears that they're behind the glass. So I am gonna jump back and forth between three markers. I'm starting with my C3 and I'm trying to hit the under edge of those bands or the top of the jar where it would have a screw-on lid. I'm literally running a line down the sides and doing a little bit of work along the bottom and on the lettering across the front of the jar. Then I'm going to come in with my Colorless Blender. I'm going to fill the center, and then I'm using a B41, which is a super light blue, and I'm flicking in from the edges in toward the center of the jar. It's going to overlap onto that Colorless Blender. I'm going up into the screws on the jar lid, coming down again, hitting those edges. Notice the C3 just blends automatically, and coming back again with my Colorless Blender. I'm softening those edges, going right against the top edge of kind of those bands on the top. And then I'm going to go ahead and go really lightly across the jar, adding a little more blue onto the letters, back to back to my Colorless Blender and blending out so that it fades a little further, coming back with C3, B41, 0 again, or Colorless Blender. I really am just going back and forth. I'm doing a lot with a Colorless Blender. I think I got a little bit too dark, and I mentioned that in the end little piece here. I think if I did this again, I would actually keep the color even lighter. trying to dry that off. And then now I'm going to come with my G43, which is the color I used, remember, on the leaves, except that I'm not going to add any G46, and I'm doing super light. I'm not putting a thick coat. I'm doing very light touch with that G43. One more time with my Colorless Blender to try to fade that out. One more time. I avoided the stems. All right, I have finished that up. Hopefully you got a sense of that working back and forth between my Colorless Blender, my blue and my gray, just to give that appearance of glass. I could keep this even lighter. I actually added quite a bit of color, and you could really keep it even lighter and further out on the edges. I chose to pull that blue pretty much all the way across except around that hello. I'm pleased with how it turned out. Just a starter piece. I could try this again and change that up a little bit, but that gives you a sense of how to use that. And that was a tip that Marianne shares in her new Intro to Coloring. Anyways, if you're a brand new beginner and you're looking for some great baseline information, this is a great place to start. That book is a great place to start, and it's easy to find and pretty cost effective. Thank you for joining me this week. I do appreciate it. Have a happy, colorful week.